Hello, everybody. My name is Julianne Peterson. Welcome to tonight's Zoom at 8. I am a commercial loan officer for Old Capital Lending. We are a premier provider for capital for multifamily, storage, mobile home parks, office, retail. And last year we closed $1 billion. Over the last couple of years, we've closed $1 billion each year. So let me know when you're looking. Come to me early so we can underwrite it for you. I'm always looking for opportunities to help where I can. And remember, time kills all deals. So tonight, I am your host. But before we get to our speaker, I want to go around and see if there's anybody in the house that is working on something that would like to share. Anybody? Danielle, what are you working on, sister? Danielle, if you haven't met Danielle, she is new. She's in the mentor program. Always great to see ladies.
Yeah. So actually today, me and my partner, or my partner and I, we went to our first market is Baltimore, and we spent a good 6 hours today looking at several properties. We went initially looking at a 36 unit that really is a huge value add position, but in the end, it's just too much deferred maintenance, really, really poor management. So, but in the end, it was still really good because we got to meet one of the top brokers in the community, and he brought us to another property, 34 unit down the street, and that looked really nice. It's stable, a little value add still there, still something to turn with that property. And we walked with a new property management company. So we made a lot of good contacts. We saw some good deals, and we're just waiting on some numbers. Hopefully this week we'll have a better knowing of what's next. So it was exciting.
You are jumping in. Great for you. Thank you, Danielle, for sharing.
Thanks.
What about anybody else? You know, we're stuck in COVID. I know here in California, we cannot wait. Who else would like to share? Anybody? The market has not really changed, although I do, let's see, hold on. David just said, I can't seem to get into the Slack from the Slack channel. Hold on, guys. Are you guys, sounded like we had some problems on the Slack channel?
There might be a timeout issue in the server. That was one of the errors I was getting. So
yeah, me too.
Oh, good. Yeah. So there's probably an error on their end right now.
Yeah, I can't seem to, does anybody know Davide? Is that right? Anybody have his cell phone that we could?
Let me try it. Let me see if I can reach him via Facebook.
Okay, that would be great. Looks like something's stuck there. Well, what about you, Chris? What are you working on? You always have something to share.
Yeah, sure. Well, still stuck in the grind. Unfortunately, we had a new attorney introduced, like 30 days ago or so, or maybe 3 weeks ago. And he's earning his money, hey, I got to advise my client this, I got to do this. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't benefit your client. Well, yeah, but and this kind of thing. So now they have it. I should have it this week, which is my SDA that I sent them. And we should be getting under contract this week or next week. We're there. We're close. We're 98%. But I've learned a lot through the process, especially dealing with 3 different attorneys on their end. They had I guess the first guy had a conflict of interest because of he had some relationship with it's unbelievable. Let me just fast forward. I'm actually writing a very detailed paper on this property because I want to share the entire story. Some of the stuff that's gone, you wouldn't even believe it. Like, what? And so I want to share that when we're done. So I've been playing with that and updating it as we go. And then we've also had a couple other deals sent our way. So we're working on a few other projects alongside with this. And then the other thing I'm doing is I'm reworking my entire website to create the lead generators, and I've got some social media starting. I'm developing a bunch of videos right now for content to send out on YouTube, and we're going to start doing some educational stuff. So that's been keeping me very busy.
That's great. Yeah. I'm getting a lot of emails or texts, I can't tell, coming in about not being able to get on. So anybody else?
Yeah, it seems to be a Slack problem, but if you go directly through Zoom, it was okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I had no problem with your,
Looks like
your
Slack
access
is
code.
down. Can you send me? Okay, so I'm getting some people wanting to jump on. So let me get that to them. All right, there we go. All right, Jonathan Barr, what are you doing? What are you working on? Anything that you can share with us?
I mean, I'm talking to investors right now and trying to raise money and get ready for hopefully some deal flow coming through. But I was working on a couple things, but the sellers just are not reasonable enough yet. You know, there's too much disconnect between buyers and sellers right now.
Wow, yeah. And we
yeah.
just don't know what's going to happen, next 2-3
Yeah.
months. Yep.
Yeah. I've been toying about an idea, like, there's going to be all this hotel, retail, office space that's going to come up that's going to be probably pretty cheap. Is like, how do we convert that into apartments and use code and zoning law and maybe some sort of like affordable component to that to make that work. Anyone that could figure that out could probably do well in the next couple of years doing something like that.
Yeah, I had heard people are looking into
especially hotels, I think.
Yeah, Kmart's and going storage in Kmart's. So that's an interesting kind of a replay, right, on that property. So yeah.
Because I've seen apartments that have been converted to hotels. I've kind of seen hotels they're usually, the way they're built similar, that you can actually, the code will allow it. And it's just probably getting some sort of variance or something from the city to allow you to actually do it with probably not a lot of construction costs.
Yeah. I got some other guys trying to jump on, so let me contact them. Mark, what are you working on? Anything?
I'm still under contract
Mark?
on 78.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, no, I can't. There's delay.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm still under contract on a 78 unit in South Carolina. And just with everything going on, we've just been extending the due diligence period and
Makes sense.
seeing what May and June rents look like before we move forward. So I've got that going on, and I'm actively just talking to brokers, seeing if there's any new opportunities up there, but I haven't found anything yet.
Yeah, that's good.
Hey, Julie, on a quick side note, I forgot to mention this. We just got the report from our property management on 104 units for May.
Yes.
And we came in at like 96% collection. And April was like 95. And we got 100 eventually, but initially, like by April 10th, it was 95. So, I mean, it's looking, and then my own personal rentals, 100%. So, I mean, everything even through May so far that I'm attached to, which is hundreds of doors, is all coming in like above 95%. It's incredible. Love it.
Yeah. That's about where my LP positions are coming in. Same thing, 2 to 3% off. So it's amazing. Yeah, really, really great. Anybody else here that wants to share before we get started with Dan? Anybody want to share with the shift, how that went? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Was that a good program for you? Did you enjoy it? Davide?
Hi, yeah. The shift was amazing. To be honest, I have to still catch up from like 4 days ago. I fell a little behind, which is the financial part. But I mean, time management, accountability, it was tremendous. I really loved it.
Yeah, it was great. I'm glad I participated in it.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, Dan Handford is in the house. Before we go over to him, is there anybody else that has something to share before we move forward? No? All right. So, Patrick, here we go. All right. Well, I would like to take this time to introduce you to Dan Handford. He is located in Columbia, South Carolina, where he resides with his wife and 4 children and a standard sized poodle. That is a smart dog, that's for sure.
You might even see her running around here behind me. Every once in a while, she makes a little cameo.
Yeah, she might bring you a coffee or something. She's so smart. Dan is one of the managing partners with PassiveInvesting.com. It is a national passive apartment investing firm based in the Carolinas. He has led his syndication company to acquire 2,000 plus units valued over $220 million in just under 24 months. This is amazing. He's passively invested in 4,500 units in 21 different syndications across the Southeast and Texas. Dan is also the founder of Multifamily Investor Nation, providing free multifamily education to the nationwide group of 26,000 members. I am one of them. Highly recommend it, you guys. He's also one of the most popular apartment investing podcasts on iTunes called Multifamily Investor Nation. I am excited to share my friend with you, Dan Handford. Please tell us, how do we start a successful podcast? We're anxious to hear from you, Dan. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I want to make sure this is it's interactive, because there's going to be some things that I bring up and I talk about that, it's going to create some questions for you. And I want to make sure that you interact with me. So for those of you who have your video on, or you have the ability to just, open your mic up, let's have a conversation. For those of you who maybe might be a little more shy or don't want to do that right now, busy kids in the background, family, you can always use the chat box there to ask any of those questions as well. One of the things I want to kind of step back and talk about is, obviously, before you get started with your podcast, you have to figure out first kind of who your target audience is going to be. Because a lot of times when we think about starting a podcast, we think about trying to be the biggest and the best and the most popular, and that's not always the best option. There's always different ways to use your podcast other than just trying to get a bunch of people to be listening to your podcast. Because I would personally rather have fewer people listen to my podcast that are actually targeted and targeted to the people that I'm trying to reach, versus having 1 million people listen to it that really aren't really going to be able to connect with my message. So to me, it's not really a popularity contest more than it is being able to reach that demographic that I'm looking for. And when I started my podcast, I actually started out with a entrepreneur podcast, and it's still out there. It's called the Tough Decisions for Entrepreneurs podcast. You can find it on iTunes and all those other different platforms. And it's a podcast that my wife and I started together. And it's one of the reasons why I started that podcast is because, for one, I needed an outlet for myself to be able to help other entrepreneurs learn how to navigate tough decisions that they experience in their businesses, and share that with the audience and the people who are listening. And my purpose of it was to have an outlet, but the second kind of purpose was to allow me to have an excuse to follow up with future people that I met with. Because a lot of times when we go and network at various events, of course, as an apartment syndication firm, we're obviously looking for passive investors to invest in our projects. And what better people than people who have a really busy business that they don't have time to focus on real estate, but they have that kind of fear of missing out in it. And so we can actually help them with that. And so when I go to network with other people, I use that in the beginning as a tool to help me further the conversation outside of a networking event. Because how many times have you been to a networking event before where you have met somebody and then you told them your story, they told you their story, and you never heard from them again, never talked to them again, that you guys maybe even exchanged business cards, but you never really had another follow-up conversation with them. And that happens all the time. But imagine if you had something like a podcast where you could actually start to further that conversation after you meet somebody. So you meet somebody who's very interesting, and maybe you want to invite them on to further that conversation on a podcast, kind of hear more of their story and talk to them further. And that's what I did in the very beginning. Now, since then, I have morphed and kind of merged into what is called our Multifamily Investor Nation podcast, which I would say has been more successful than the other one, but it was successful in a different way, because the entrepreneur podcast, again, was just to have that additional talking time with somebody that I met in person, right? That was somebody who owned a business that I knew I wanted to be able to, you know, connect with further. But the multifamily podcast was one that I wanted to be able to find people who were interested in learning more about multifamily. To, you know, a lot of times people will go and learn more about multifamily thinking that they want to do it themselves. And what you end up finding out is that they throw their hands up and go, you know what, after I know all this stuff that's involved, this is a lot of work. I don't want to do it. Here's my money. You do it. Right. And that's the whole reason why I started the MFIN group, was to find those specific people. And to give you a little bit of an idea as to how successful that the program has been, we don't have a really high level paid coaching program where someone's, you know, spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year with us to coach. I don't have the time for that. And so I decided not to do it. And so all I have is I'm just providing a lot of, you know, free value to people. And on a weekly basis, I'm very consistent with it. And we closed a $51.5 million deal, which is our largest deal to date, in October of last year. And in the middle of this COVID-19, we're actually in the process of closing another $50 million deal to be $49.955 million. And we'll have raised almost $20 million in the last 8 weeks to be able to close this project on time within 60 days on Friday of this week. And we couldn't have done that if we didn't already have a lot of these different pieces of the puzzle already in place, because in the last deal in October of last year, we raised $14 million in just under 2 weeks to acquire that property, which we felt was really great, right? To be able to raise that kind of money in just under 2 weeks was phenomenal. And since October up until now, we've had an additional 700 new investors come through our website expressing the interest in getting under our wings, if you will, to learn more about multifamily from the passive side of things. And so since we've acquired those new people, I think because of that velocity, it allowed us to be able to have enough investors that we could actually get to this point in the middle of the pandemic and still be able to raise that kind of money. Because there's not a lot of people right now that are raising money. And in a perfect world, I wish I wasn't either, right? Because I told my wife the other day that this is the hardest I've ever worked in my entire life, because we've had to have a lot more conversations, a lot more phone calls to kind of allow our investors to understand the dynamics of the market. And the deal, of course, is a really good, solid deal that's, you know, perfect for this kind of situation. But the podcast is one of the things that kind of helped with that. And when I sat down to think about the podcast, I didn't want to just come up with a podcast that was just what everybody else was doing. And so when you're sitting down thinking about what kind of a podcast could I put together, you have to step back and you have to go, what is it that somebody at my end, target, avatar or demographic am I looking for? What are they going to be searching for that they'll end up finding me? And for me, I saw a lot of people out there doing a lot of podcasts where they were inviting a lot of like experts on, or people who had different products or services, and interviewing them. And that stuff is still good and valid, but a lot of people were already doing it. And I was like, I don't want to just be another commodity, right? I wanted to kind of stand out from the crowd. And in order for me to do that, I needed to come up with a really different, unique topic. And the topic that I came up with for my podcast was, all we're going to do is interview people who are actively closing deals, and they could not be on the podcast unless they closed a deal in the last 12 months. And that's the criteria. And I'll tell you, we've had very few large syndicators come on that are in the guru space, because right now they haven't been closing a lot of deals, right? And they do a lot of coaching, but they're not closing deals because they might have done a lot of it in the past. But I want to get people who are right now in the trenches closing deals. And in these interviews that I have, there's no fluff. It's always like, tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's dive into how you found that deal, how you underwrote the deal, how you worked with the investors, what did you buy it for, how'd you negotiate, did you retrade, what about due diligence, all the way down to the nuts and bolts of the financing and how many investors they have, and all of that kind of good stuff. And then really diving deep into learning how people are putting these deals together. And it's not only helped me, but I get a lot of good feedback from our investors that's how they find us, is that they're finding us. And then, of course, in a podcast setting, I'm the one that's being interviewed. I'm actually the one interviewing other investors, and they get to see my knowledge as well. And so because I'm the one interviewing, it puts me in that authority position and kind of elevates me to a point where they feel confident to be able to invest with us. And that's one of the main reasons why you want to consider doing a podcast, is to put yourself kind of in that position of an authority so that so that you have that automatic and built-in credibility. One thing I do want to go over with you real quick to kind of drive home this point is I want to use a whiteboard here on the screen with you and share this little thing with you. I like to share this. If you've seen me speak before, you might have seen me do this before, but I want to share this with you real quick. It's a little whiteboard thing, a little whiteboard, what do you call it? I don't know, activity, I guess, if you want to call it activity. And what I would suggest you do during this that would be really beneficial for you is go find a piece of paper and do this. And actively do this with me. So what you want to do is, on this piece of paper, I want you to actually draw a really large triangle on your piece of paper, just like this. Okay. So go do this right now. I'm gonna try to see if I can increase this font size a little bit so you can see. In the middle of it, I want you to write the words investor triad. Okay. Investor triad. And inside of this investor triad, on the top of this peak, I want you to write the word no, okay, and K-N-O-W. And again, I'm not the best artist when it comes to drawing with a mouse, so bear with me here. So write the word no at the top. On the bottom left, put the word like. And then on the bottom right, I want you to put the word trust, okay? So you guys have probably seen something similar to this or heard about something like this, but so this is this no, like, and trust triangle, and I call it our investor triad. Now, for those of you that are on right now, instead of unmuting your mics or whatever, I want you to find your chat box real quick, and I want you to answer something for me. So of these three things, which of these three things do you think is the most important? Is it no, like, or trust? And I want you to just type it in there. First thing that comes to your mind, which is the one that's the most important of these three things? Is it no, like, or trust? And so as you guys are typing this in, everybody can see your answers here. We got trust, 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 trust. We got no, trust, no. And a couple of you are getting it right, okay? And this is gonna be something that's gonna probably kind of expand your thinking right now, because a lot of times we get caught up in, I want somebody to like me, or I want someone to trust me, right? But at the end of the day, the most important piece of this is actually this top portion, which is why I put it at the top. It's this knowing part. And the reason why it's the most important is because nobody will ever have the opportunity to make an opinion as to whether or not they like or trust you until they start to know you. And that's the whole purpose of a podcast, right? Is for people to get to know you. And as people get to know you, guess what? There's going to be people that won't like you, and that's okay. You're not trying to reach the people that don't like you. You're trying to reach the people that you can really connect with. And those are the people that you can build that likeness with, and that'll eventually have trust in you to be able to wire you funds, 100, 200, 300,000, whatever it is, to be able to acquire a property. And that a lot of times will start with a podcast. So I want to stop for just a minute here and open it up and see if anybody has any questions for me, because I know I talk really fast. My mom is actually from California. My dad's from Illinois. I grew up in South Carolina, and I always talk really, really fast. But I always like to talk fast because it gets a lot of energy going as well. So if you have questions, I want you to open your mic here and just open and then ask some questions. If you want to just type it into the chat box there, you can do that as well.
Hey, Dan. I'm in your mailing list, and I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts. I really like them. You're doing a great job. How do you keep up with, I mean, it's a lot of work. Is that your main focus? I know you're doing a bit of everything, but I would assume your focus is the podcast and connecting with investors. Is that what you do, like, say, 6 hours a day at least?
I would say no. So our podcast is a weekly podcast. So every week we'll release an episode. And actually lately, I've been a little bit lacking on it. I've been not as consistent as I should be. But one of the things that you need to do in the beginning is do it yourself. And that's what I did, is I did it all myself. And it would take some time throughout the day to do it. But I wanted to know kind of the process of how it actually worked. And then I started to actually outsource it. I actually personally now use a company called Podetize, Podetize, and it's a full service podcast editing agency. They host your podcast, do everything. And they have a couple other unique features. I'm not trying to like sell them on you or anything, but that's the service that I use. And the only thing that I do now is once a week for an hour, I do my interviews. And my assistant, actually, I have a director of marketing and public relations, and she takes the podcast episode that's recorded on Zoom and she uploads it to Podetize. Podetize does everything else. So they actually convert it to video. They actually convert it to the actual audio portion. They do all the editing. They do the show notes. They post it on the website. They blast it out to all the different channels. So really the podcast for me right now only takes me about 45 minutes to an hour every week. Now, there's also the level of trying to find guests, right? And so one of the nice things that I have right now is I have the Multifamily Investor Nation, where whenever I need guests, I just make a post in my closed Facebook group and say, hey, I need some people that have closed a multifamily deal, 5 units or more over the last 12 months, go. And I'll have, 20 or 30 people that'll post in there about how many units they've closed, or they'll tag somebody that maybe has closed deals, and I get to interview some really, pretty cool people around the world. And I say around the world because we have people that we've interviewed that are closing deals in Israel and China and Australia, and also mostly here in the States.
Thank you.
Hey, Dan, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Chris Roberts. The question, first of all, I want to compliment you on your podcast. I have had some issues downloading it. You must have the highest quality podcast in the world, because sometimes I can't actually pull up the podcast, but they're amazing. And also I wanted to compliment you on the POP or I guess direct mailings that you send out. I have never seen anything like that. I mean, and I have not invested with you yet. I've invested with Joe, and he's got some amazing things he sends out as well, but really, really good stuff. And I'm not sure if you're outsourcing that or you do that in-house, but it's absolutely phenomenal. Those books you send, the mailings, unbelievable. So nice work there. The specific question I have for you is, as it relates to driving investors, would you say as a percentage, let's just say like 1, 2, 3, you've got your podcasts, you've got regular networking, and you've got whether it be direct mail or other, what would you say as a percentage when you're driving investors in, those are broken up as, people coming in from your podcast or networking or other?
I don't really have a good answer to that, Chris. And let me first thank you for your compliments. It really means a lot. There are a few things we outsource, but as far as like the newsletter and things like that, all of that stuff we do in-house. And same thing with our investor packages that we put together. That's all done in-house. And we have a really good team that actually does that for us, which is really nice. And we have our director of marketing and PR, her name is Melissa. And I always tell her, all right, go Melissify it. And she makes us look really good. So I definitely have a really good team, and obviously it shows, and I'll make sure I tell them those compliments as well, because it definitely means a lot. Whenever somebody asks me that kind of question of kind of what percentage is, or do you feel like the podcast, kind of like David said, does that give you a lot more, does it take a lot of your time throughout the day to be able to put those podcasts together? And the biggest thing that I would say is that there is not one thing that I do that I could tell you brings the most investors. So even in I don't know how much you guys know about my background, but I also have a group of medical clinics that my wife and I started from scratch. And we have 4 of them right now. And one of the things that we did with them is this same kind of concept of using a multimodal approach to marketing. And so, yes, I have my podcast, but like you said, Chris, I'm everywhere, right? Sure. And it's because I'm doing not just the podcast, but I'm doing the YouTube channel. I'm doing our weekly webinars every single week. And we have LinkedIn content, we have blog articles, and we have, of course, the podcast, and we have the MFIN closed Facebook group, and we have the Multifamily Investor Nation Summit that we do twice a year. We have one in January and then one coming up here next month in June. And so there's a lot of different things that we're doing. And there's never one thing every month that just is like stands out from everything else. And the reason why I'm a big believer in the multimodal approach is because one month you might actually see the podcast do really well, bring in a lot of leads, right? And then the next month it might not bring any at all. But that's what happens with marketing, is that you have to be consistent with your marketing, and over time it actually stabilizes. And I'll give you a little bit of an example. because I have all these different things that are going on for me, I never have those kind of low months and then the really, really high months. It's usually pretty steady. And so in most small businesses, not just multifamily, not just the medical clinics, but even restaurants and plumbers and all kinds of, types of businesses, they get into this kind of sine wave, if you will, of marketing, where when they first open their business, they do a ton of marketing, they do a ton of different advertisements, and they see this huge spike in new patients or clients or new investors, and then they get lazy, right? And they stop their marketing, they start their advertising, and it starts to go down. And then they get into this like, oh crap mode, right? And they're like, oh crap, we can't make the bill, pay the bills. We got to start spending money on advertising. And they have these big, huge like ebbs and flows in their business. And we don't have that. And it's because we have these multimodal approaches that are out there constantly reaching people to be able to get into our circles. And once we get them into our circles, what you're talking about, Chris, is a whole nother level that could be a whole nother episode that we do of this meeting of what are you doing to, once you get an investor, keep them, put a fence around them and keep them close to you, right? Because I want our investors to be so close to me that the next deal that I put together, they're ready and going to jump into that next deal. And I think because of how well we do in maintaining those relationships and making sure our investors don't feel like just a number, they feel like they have a relationship with us. That's why we're able to raise the amount of money that we've been able to raise. In the last 18 months, our group has raised almost $50 million to acquire our properties. And it's to me, and it wasn't in the very beginning that it was like this, right? It took time for us to put all this into place. But right now, every month, we actually use a software called Active Campaign. It's a CRM that we use. You might have heard of it before. We use it, and it allows us to be on our dashboard. It tells us how many leads have come in off our website that have been to our website, filled out that passive investor club form to join our investor list. And it's typically anywhere between about 80 to about 120 every rolling 30 days that are coming to our website, actively filling out that form. And there's never usually a month that's like 10 or 20 or 0, right? Now in the beginning, it started off, 5, 20, 10, 35, and it started to grow. And I would be lying if I didn't say in the last 6 weeks that it dropped down below like 45 because of whole COVID-19. Yes, it did. But thankfully, it went back up. Like right now, I just checked it this afternoon. It's at 94 in the last 30 days that we've actually had come through our website. And so it's not just one thing that I can say, this is it, but it's starting with one thing, being consistent and doing that one thing, and then starting with thing 2 and thing 3 and thing 4 and continually kind of combining these approaches. Because usually you're going to have to take 6, 7, 8 different touches with an investor before they actually feel confident with filling out a form. And I will tell you that most investors that I talk to, they don't usually hear about us from just one thing. They hear about us on a podcast. They hear about us on our YouTube channel. They've been following us on our weekly webinars. They were referred to us by somebody. They took those newsletters that you're talking about that we mail to our investors every month, and they took it to the office and they passed it around to their coworkers, and it created a conversation. And so they have these multiple touches that are helping them build that confidence once they get to know us.
Well, thank you. That is a spectacular answer. And so you're using really an omni-channel or a synergistic approach from many angles, which again, second to none. I've never seen. I mean, I've had things sent to me for multi-million-dollar businesses, and they were not as high a quality as the stuff you're sending out. So keep up.
Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it shows. So keep at it. So you answered my question. Thank you very much.
Chris, I'm getting dizzy with that backdrop.
That's a multi-million-dollar backdrop right there, Chris.
Yeah, I'll change it. Hold on, I'll change it for you. Here we go.
So Dan, we just finished a thing called The Shift. And one of the questions was, how do we start our business? What are we going to need? How much money is that going to cost us? I'm just curious from your standpoint, what you did to start to launch your business, 24, 36 months ago, what kind of budget you put yourself, put into that. Did you have a marketing department that you collaborated with? What did that look like?
So in the very beginning, it was me doing everything, right? And that's how I've started pretty much all of my businesses, is me being the one that does everything in the very beginning. But I did learn in one of my earlier businesses that about probably 8 or 9 years ago, that I have a mental flaw, and my mental flaw is probably similar to not most of you, but a lot of you, in that you feel like you can do everything better than everybody else. And that's me. Like I to this day, I still feel like I can do everything better than everybody else, but I realize that's my mindset or my thought, and I have to, change that or do something to fix that. And so for me, I had to come up to the conclusion that even though I feel like I can do everything better than everybody else, I cannot grow my business if I am the one doing everything that everybody else should be doing. And so I started earlier on learning how to delegate a lot of those tasks. And if I can find somebody that can do it 80 to 85% as good as I can, then I can feel comfortable moving it on to them, so I can continue to grow and move into a different part of the business and start working on my business and not always working in the business, right? And so in the very beginning, I would do everything. And if I was to put, we haven't actually put any ad dollars other than on the MFIN Summit. So the money that I make off the MFIN Summit, I don't usually make a lot of money off of that. So every single summit that we've done, we've collected at least 6 figures of revenue from the ticket sales. But all of that money goes back into marketing the practice, marketing. See, I'm thinking about the clinic, but it goes into marketing for new investors to attract them to the summit. And it's the reason why the very first one we did in January 19, we had over 500 people. The first one we did. The second one we did in June of last year, of 2019, we had over 600. The one we just did in January of this year, we had over 800. And the one hopefully next month that we have coming up will hit the 1,000 mark of investors that are actually getting under our fold and starting to learn about us. Now, again, that's from the MFIN Summit side. So it's an educational platform. And so outside of that platform, for like passiveinvesting.com, we haven't really spent any money marketing, if you will, other than once we get our investors in our fold, we send out the monthly newsletter. That costs us right around probably $2,000 a month to send that out. And it's because there's one article in there, because Chris asked me about, do I outsource anything? There's one article in there, and Chris probably has seen it before. We have articles in there that we do on our investors, where we actually interview an investor, and we have our person who's our copywriter actually interview that investor and write up a nice article about them. But we actually write those articles ourselves, but the cost of printing and the cost of mailing and the cost of that copywriter is usually about $2,000 a month. Now, I didn't start that way, right? And in the very beginning, it wouldn't have cost me that much, because I wouldn't have paid somebody to do that interview. I'd have just done it myself, and I would have actually mailed all the stuff and licked the stamps and put them on the envelopes and done everything myself. And I would have only had maybe 20 or 30 people on that list. But now it's starting to grow, right? We actually didn't start building that list until about the fall of last year. And so right now we're right at about 400 investors that are on that mailing list. And then on our email list, we have about 1,800 people that are exclusive in our passive investing club that have expressed, and we've had conversations with, that are in our fold right now. But in the very beginning, I really wasn't spending that much at all, because even with the podcast, I was doing that myself. A lot of the stuff that I grew was organic. Especially with the passiveinvesting.com group. The only thing I still am spending money on, in addition to that from the MFIN Summit, is I have 53 meetup groups that I have co-organizers in, all those different meetup groups around the country and even some into Canada. And we pay a monthly fee to meetup.com to be able to have that platform, to be able to attract new people to us. And so that platform we are spending money on, and that cost me about $1,800 a month for that one. Oh. But when we first got started, we didn't have 53 groups, right? It's consistently built up over time. And I actually started in January of this year. Again, these things kind of just grow as you continue to grow your business. I started a premium program for our MFIN group, where they pay $99 a month and they get access to me for 1 hour during the week. It's a group coaching call for an hour. And then I provide them with an online content library from everything from A to Z on multifamily, right? And so I structured it that way because I didn't have the time, nor do I really need the money to actually put together a large coaching program. to me, I just get like pits in my stomach thinking about trying to coach 50 people that spent, gobs of money with me and me not being able to service those people the proper way. And so I put that together, and that helps to underwrite some of the costs, if you will, for the meetup platform that we have as well. So right now we have probably about 60, 70 members that are part of that MFI and premium group. And honestly, I haven't actually promoted that outside of my weekly webinars and my MFI and Summit that I did in January. And we have about 60 to 70 people that are in that right now. And I'm still kind of perfecting it, kind of getting all the kinks out. And another lesson on top of that would be, whatever you're thinking about starting, right? Wherever you are right now, you have to start with version 1, right? Because version 1 is always better than version none, right? If you never get started, you never can have a version 2.0. Now that's also where people get into trouble is they start with version 1.0 and they stop, right? Well, no, you start with version 1.0 and then you continue to perfect and you continue to get better and you continue to transition to an even, better space. And then you get that 2.0. And guess what? Then you're going to get 3.0 and 4.0, and then it continues to improve and get better.
I have a question again. New people, a lot of these folks on here are in their, haven't had a deal or maybe have one deal under their belt. Did you find it challenging, or did you get feedback like, well, you have never done a deal, number one, and how did you go about finding your deal sponsor to help you launch your business? What were your steps?
Sure. So two things there. So first off, one of the things that I always recommend in the very beginning, and I'm not sure what size deals everybody is looking at, but one of the things that I always recommend and suggest is to build your track record and to build your credibility. It's a very good idea. And it's what I did for my first 2 or 3 projects is I actually found somebody else that I could co-GP with and learn some of the steps and learn some of those ropes, build my credibility. The very first deal that our group bought was an $8.9 million property, 130 units that had $2 million in CapEx. And we didn't get the deal in the very beginning. We actually lost it to the highest bidder, but we stuck with our numbers and the deal fell through with that original buyer. And they came back to us and said, do you want it? And we were able to get that deal. And then once we closed that deal, the next deals just usually fall in line after that. And of course, we're really excited right now because when we can close a deal in the middle of this pandemic, we pretty much go to the top of the lists of all of the sellers and the brokers of, can they actually close? Well, yeah, they can. They closed a $50 million deal, raising $20 million in the middle of COVID-19, where everybody else is holding back and contracting, deals falling through, and so you have to first, I think, co-GP with somebody else. Now, I can't really give you a good answer as far as the sponsor because I was my own sponsor and I've been my own sponsor in all of our projects. So I provide our own net worth and liquidity because of my own businesses and background. And even from the experience side of things, although the lenders actually made exemptions for that because of the level of the net worth and liquidity, but also because they know that I have businesses that have budgets that exceed the budgets that we have for the actual properties at the same time. So for me, what I always tell our MFI and premium members is, for one, our premium members, I give them a list of about 7 or 8 different people that have reached out to me saying, hey, I'm willing to be a co-sponsor. I'm willing to be a key principal to help be a loan guarantor for some people who are getting started. And I tell them, I say, contact those people right away. Don't wait till you have a deal. Like, you got to build that relationship with these people now. And so that when you have a deal, they already know you and they're like, yeah, let's do it. But if somebody calls one of these sponsors, like, I got a deal under contract and I'm closing in a week, forget it. These people don't want to have that kind of relationship, because even though these are a lot of times non-recourse loans, they do have some bad boy carve outs in them. And I would say the biggest thing for me, which is why I don't do it for other groups or other people, is I have a reputation to uphold. And I've seen other larger syndicators sign on loans for people, and those deals have fallen through. And guess who gets their name dragged through the mud in the media? It's not the syndicator that put it together. It's the person with the deeper pockets. And it's that person that was put on there as a loan guarantor. This XYZ person's a slumlord or whatever, and threw it under the ground. And it's also a reputation to me. So even though I can sign on somebody's dotted line and make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 just by providing my balance sheet, to me, that's just not worth it enough to me to be able to risk that. And so I've only actually signed on one other person's note, and that's it up to this point, other than our own groups. So you have to build relationships with these sponsors that you are aware of. And obviously right now with COVID, it's kind of hard to have in-person conversations because we're not going to events, we're not going to conferences, but going to events, going to conferences, networking with people, you can find people that are willing to be those sponsors, but you got to start building those relationships with them first.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are a little bit disappointed that Dealmaker Live, which you have spoken on, and you're well known in the industry. And again, thank you for joining us. But a lot of us don't have that experience to be at a conference, to be able to hobnob with people. This would have been our first deal sponsor live. And so getting on a Zoom call, you don't get to really touch each other, if you will. And so I think that we're a little bit more challenged by this, any suggestions how to do that? Yeah. Pick up the phone. I mean, I picked up the phone to call you, but I don't think that some people that don't necessarily have a platform or are just getting started, it can be difficult to get, folks like yourself on the line. Right. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. Well, if you're part of any type of like Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups or anything like that, making a post out there and saying, hey, I'm looking for a sponsor. I don't have a deal yet. I would love to have a conversation with you. Most of these people are out there and are on these groups, and you just have to be proactive. If they make a comment or, a lot of times you can say, if you know somebody that might be interested, tag them, right? And people will tag other people that they know that would potentially be these sponsors. And other people that you talk to, ask them, say, hey, who do you know that could potentially sign on one of my loans? And then you can start those conversations, but you do have to be a little more proactive about it to be able to find somebody who is willing to, kind of take that gamble, if you will, and sign on some of your let. I know it looks like Danielle might've had a question there. Did you have a question, Danielle?
Oh, hi. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. By the way, thanks Julie for setting this up, and thanks Dan for being here tonight. I've seen you up on the meetups, and congrats to all your success in just a short period of time. So I'm actually a physician, and I have my own practice, and I have fallen in love with real estate. So I'm new to taking on bigger investments and doing bigger deals. And I think eventually that's something I'll transition to more full time. But what I'm dealing with is, certainly I have an opportunity to access my doctor peers, as far as potential investors. And I have a concern about how does that land for them? Oh, wait, you're a doctor and what you're doing, syndication, what is that? So, and I think maybe because I'm new to this, I haven't gotten my sea legs to have that conversation where it's easy and fluid. And ultimately, I think that's something, I'd like to access more. I was wondering if you could give me some advice about that. And also, I don't know if you're still looking for partnerships to do meetups in the DC metro area, because I like to support that. So,
yeah. No, definitely shoot me an email, dan@passiveinvesting.com, and let's have a conversation about that, because we do have some openings there in the DC market for one of our meetup groups. So to answer your question, this is a great topic to bring up, because, yes, you're a physician, you're trying to do real estate investing, do some syndications, and there might be other people on here. Maybe they're not a physician. Maybe they're, I don't know, maybe you used to be a plumber, right? And you're trying to go find people to invest in, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with you. And, they're like, wait a minute, I thought you were a plumber, or I thought you were a physician, right? There's two things that will really benefit you the most when it comes to investing, especially in these larger syndications, is number one, finding a good solid group that you can, number one, and passively invest with yourself first. Mm-hmm. Because then you can have conversations about investing in real estate, and it's not you asking for money. It's really saying, hey, let me show you what I just invested with. And like Chris talked about, one of the things I send out are these really nice, printed, booklets that we actually, you might have seen like some investor summaries put together before, but we actually print them out nice, like, perfect bound, things. And that's something you can show them, say, hey, look what I just invested with, something like that. Yeah. And it creates that conversation. And so that's the first thing. And that's what I did in the beginning too, because I figured I would have the same problem, Danielle, because I would have people that would be like, wait a minute, I thought you ran medical clinics. I thought you did this. I thought you did that. What do you mean you want me to invest, $100,000 in your next deal, right? There was a big disconnect there. And so I did start passively investing first. And then my second thing that I did was, and I kind of already mentioned it, but it helps with this same issue, is I co-GP'd with somebody else first. So now, instead of me saying, hey, I started my own syndication group and here's a deal that I found, a deal that I put together, I'm now leveraging somebody else's credibility. I'm saying, hey, I have now actually joined and partnered with this other more experienced group, and I have this deal that I want to show you, invest with it or not, right? And it allows you to have those conversations. And it's not going to be easy, Danielle. I'll tell you that right now. My very first deal that I actually raised money for as a co-GP, I barely raised $500,000. Like I actually had to put in the last 150 myself, right? Because it was just so hard for me to be able to penetrate that unit of people that didn't really know that I was doing real estate investing. And so it is going to be a bit of a challenge, but you got to start having those conversations and you got to start building those relationships now. And one of the things I always have done is and I even have conversations with our investors about this now, is I say, I don't ever feel pressured to invest in a deal. All I want to do is educate you and share with you what we're doing. And you will know when it's right for you to invest. You will be comfortable, you will be confident, and you will have no problems and issues wiring us 100,000 or 200 or whatever it is from your bank account. Mm-hmm. And you have to feel that way because you're not selling anything, right? This is not a sales pitch to anybody. This is, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what we've put together, invested in. Great. If not, it's okay. You can sit on the sidelines. You can wait for the next deal, but they'll be eventually get to that point where they'll have that like fear of missing out type of mentality as well. Like, hey, Danielle's going to end up making more money than me, so I better start investing my money so I can grow it just like she is, right? But you got to start somewhere. And so start passively investing, co-GP with somebody else, and start those conversations. And then when you start raising for your very first deal, it'll be a little bit easier. Now, that very first deal that I raised for, that was our own deal, $8.9 million. It wasn't easy, right? That was probably the second hardest next to the one we just did because of the whole COVID stuff. But that was probably the hardest deal that we raised for, because we were raising just over $2 million to acquire that property. And it took all the way up until the day of closing to get the final amount of money to close that deal. And it was nerve-wracking the entire time, but we were having conversations every single day to get that deal closed. And we eventually got it through the closing line. And there were a lot of people that missed out and didn't get into that deal. And guess what? They jumped into the next deal, right? Because they saw we actually did that one, performed, and closed it. And we went on to the next deal and the next deal. And you will see that it will start to get easier and easier as you start to have those conversations. And I would encourage you to potentially start a podcast that's related to like physicians and in real estate investing and multifamily, because that is something that a lot of these white coat investors, if you will, are missing is that whole real estate investing piece. And a lot of them are just so busy in work, they don't have time to do this, but they want to invest. And all they're really stuck with is some sort of financial advisor investing them in stocks and mutual funds and bonds and, indexes and ETFs and all that kind of stuff. And they know that that's not the best thing, but they have no time to do anything else. And so if you can kind of come in there and show them the way, if you will, and show them a different path and show them the results that you're seeing and the tax benefits of it, it can be a game changer for you.
Dan, so helpful. I don't feel when I listen to you pressure. How you get some people that, you got to jump into my deal. And that's the thing that oozes when you speak. No problem. I think you really have such a nice touch with the way that you present. It's so refreshing. And you're so generous. You're so generous with your information.
Well, I will tell you that investors can sense that, right? Investors can sense when you need the money, right? And for me, at the end of the day, I want to make sure our investors are comfortable with every investment that they're in. And I even had an investor, I co-GP'd with the group that, fast forward to today, I probably didn't do enough due diligence on that group, and I probably shouldn't have done a co-GP with them, but I did. And I brought some investors in, and I brought an investor in that really needed cash flow, right? And that deal ended up not producing a lot of cash flow. And so the guy called me up one day, and I knew what he was going to say. I remember having the conversation with him about needing cash flow because he was retired, right? Or getting ready to retire. And I knew he was going to need that. And I said, I'll just make up a name. I'll just say Bob, because it wasn't his name, but I'll just say, I said, Bob, stop. I already know what you're going to say. I remember our conversation from the very beginning. And I know that you needed cash flow. And I don't want you to be upset with me. I don't want you to be upset with this deal. At the end of this day, this deal is going to be great. It's going to be a solid deal. But I know right now, because you don't know a lot about the inner workings of this deal, and there's not a lot of cash flow right now, that it's troublesome for you. And so I told him, I said, I am willing to buy your shares out and make you whole so you can move on to the next investment. And he stopped and he was like, you would do that? And I was like, yes. I said, because I know that that's what you needed in the very beginning. And I don't want you to be stuck in a deal, because then he would never invest with me again. Mm-hmm. Since then, he's invested in 2 of our other deals.
Great success story, Dan. Hey, before we get finished up here, Jonathan Barr, who it sounds like he's an introvert, would you recommend?
I mean, I could say it in person. I just wanted to make sure that it got seen.
Yeah, go ahead then. Go ahead.
Yeah, for someone that is more of an introvert, would you recommend maybe starting a blog and starting with that? Kind of dip your toes into showing kind of the way you think and the way you look at things, but doing it that way?
Yes, that would be a very good avenue. So the thing that I think you should start with is really kind of figuring out for yourself, what is it that you excel at and that you really enjoy and you really like to do? Are you really good in front of video? Well, go and do a YouTube video page or channel, right? If you really like to talk, then start a podcast, right? You could do something like that. If you are the type of person that really likes to sit down and think and write, well, start a blog, write a book, do those different things. But one of the things that I will tell you, Jonathan, is that at my core, I am actually an introvert. But when I get in front of people that really have the same connection with me and same kind of passions that I do, I do start to open up. But I will tell you that I absolutely hate going to an event and just randomly going up to people and introducing myself. To me, it's just like the nails on a chalkboard. I just don't like it. Usually when I get done speaking, I'll go up to my hotel room and just sit in my hotel room and relax, right? And unless I get stopped, which again, people stopping me is what I like. So I have started to do this thing called reverse networking, where when I go to an event now, people have seen me all over the place. So I never have to go up to them. They actually stop me. Like if I go to a multifamily event, it's hard for me to sometimes go to the bathroom without somebody stopping me and saying hi, introducing themselves, telling me about how they know me. And they know more about me than I know about them because they've been following me all over the place, right? And so doing something like a blog, but the biggest thing with the blog is don't just post it on your website, right? You need to post it as a native LinkedIn article. You need to post it as a Bigger Pockets article natively, not like just sharing the link, but natively sharing that content everywhere you see it. Posting
what
it
is
as
natively
on that platform. So instead of just posting a link to your article on your website on LinkedIn, going to LinkedIn and starting an article and putting that content from your blog on an article on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn will also promote it more too, because they want to promote more of their stuff that's actually being posted on their platform. Okay. And then doing the same thing on Bigger Pockets and other types of platforms. You can do that same thing on Facebook. You can do it on all kinds of different platforms, and it allows you to be able to increase the reach for your blog itself as well.
For me, it's definitely like a better form. Like I'm definitely like sit and think and write things out and kind of look at things in different ways that other people might not be looking at it. and letting people agree or not agree with that way of looking at it.
And it sounds to me like you're the type of person where if, 10,000 people a month were reading those articles and you went to a multifamily event and they came up to you and started talking to you, you would have no problems at all talking to that person. But you're probably not the type of person that's going to go up to somebody at a networking event, shake their hand, introduce yourself, and start that conversation.
Not willingly.
Sometimes you have to force yourself to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you really have to get into the groove and practice, because you could waste a lot of time and energy. You go to those conventions, conferences to build your business, to expand it. So there are ways to do that. Hey,
You got to put yourself out of your comfort zone, for sure.
Yes, yes. Hey, Dan, you have been so generous with your information and sharing. And I just want to thank you so much for your time and energy. And I know that we have many, many more questions for you. Is there a way, can you tell us how we can get a hold of you?
Sure. So there's two different ways. So if you want to just follow me on our Multifamily Investor Nation platform and see some more of the content that we're doing, you can just go to multifamilyinvestornation.com to find out more information. You can also subscribe to our podcast by just going to mfinpodcast.com, and it'll bring you straight over to the iTunes platform. You can also search for it on iTunes or Google Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We're all over the place. And the other way, if you're interested in possibly joining one of our joining us on one of our future opportunities, you can go to our website, passiveinvesting.com, sign up on the top right-hand corner for our investor list, and I'll be glad to have a further conversation with you to see if we're a good fit, have that one-on-one call with you. And then if you are, we can potentially partner on a future property. So thank you so much, Julie Van, for having me here. And thank you all for also being attentive and being interactive as well. It's very good.
Yeah, thank you so much. So before we go, everyone, I want to remind you that tomorrow, Wednesday, May 13th at 1 o'clock Central, Marcus and Millichap and Old Capital Lending will be doing a webinar, and it will be speaking with David Moore. Hey, this guy has 40,000 units. So it's something you want to take the time, spend an hour with us. We're also going to be discussing insurance and taxes as well as eviction. So take the time. There is a link. I did post it on the Dealmaker Live. I can do it again, but if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I would love it. If you can't make it, sign up for it anyway, and then we'll get you the replay. So that's it for tonight. I just want to thank you all for joining us. Remember, my goal is to provide value. And if there is anything that I can be doing, whether it's to be educating you on finances or putting you in touch with people that are doing it, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help. We are part of our Slack family, and anything I can do to help, I'm here for you. So I'm gonna close it up with that. You guys, everyone have a great weekend. Be safe, be well, stay away from the COVID, and we will be in touch with you next week on the Zoom at 8. Thanks so much, you guys. Have a great night.
Night.
Bye,
Thank you.